Professionally, what I do, I have many hats. And so at the National Hurricane Center, I'm in charge of the storm surge unit. So you can imagine during a hurricane what I might be doing. You know, making forecasts and on the phone with people like Drew, helping to convey that forecast. But I also have another role, and I'm effectively the federal expert on national level initiatives. And then more recently, storm surge has become a global phenomenon in the sense that people have suddenly awakened to it. And so I also go to other countries and help other less developed countries stand up storm surge capacity and emergency management and planning and this sort of stuff. So I fly all over the globe trying to help people with storm surge. And so I'm going to bring to you today some of that experience. I was just in the Dominican Republic not long ago today. But first of all, we need to debunk some myths. So people are absolutely enamored with hurricanes, but they're enamored with the wrong part of a hurricane. The first thing people ask when a hurricane is coming to the coast, be it North Carolina or anywhere else, is what number on the Saffir-Simpson scale is it, right? And so much of your opinion of that storm, so much of what your mind is telling you that storm will or won't do is based off that number. But that number tells you absolutely nothing about the impacts. It is a wind-only scale. Say it with me. A wind-only scale. And not only that, it is the peak wind anywhere inside the storm. It's not necessarily the wind that you're going to get in your community. So it's not the best thing to be enamored with. Yet when we look at statistics, and this is a really recent poll, 84% of those polled think that they need to evacuate based off the strength of the wind. 84% think that they need to evacuate based off the strength of the wind. So your populace, and I assure you it's going on in this county too, your populace is making decisions about their vulnerability based off the Saffir-Simpson scale. We've got a problem, and we've got to begin moving people in a better direction with respect. Specifically, we have to start convincing people that it's the water, not the wind, that's killing them. Here's another recent study done by our deputy director at the National Hurricane Center. So this is, if you look back in the last several decades at how people died in a hurricane. So this is looking backwards, historical hurricanes, how they lost their life. Only 8% died from wind. 8%. What are they dying from? They're drowning. People are drowning in a hurricane, either from storm surge, which represents about half of the lives lost, or freshwater rain, which represents about a fourth of the lives lost. When you add it all together, basically 3/4 of the lives lost are from drowning, not from wind. We have to stop being enamored with the wind and focus on the water. And this is why I'm here. This is why I travel nonstop, is to try to break this vicious cycle of focusing on the wrong aspects of a hurricane. So this is a shot from Hurricane Katrina in Biloxi, Mississippi. So this is not New Orleans. It's a different story in New Orleans. This is Biloxi, Mississippi. Classic storm surge image. What do you notice? What's striking about this image? It's gone. It's down to the slab. There is nothing left. No infrastructure, no steps, nothing. No human could survive that. And yet people ride out these hurricanes because, and you've heard it before, right? I was here 15 years ago when Hurricane so-and-so came by and it wasn't that bad, right? Have you heard this before? This is what you're up against. This is what you're up against, and this is what we're trying to change. Hurricane Ike, what do you notice here? Gone. Looks like a big old bulldozer. Actually, it did. In Katrina, when I went afterwards, it looked like somebody just took a big old bulldozer and just pushed, and at some point stopped, and there's just a big mound of junk, debris on the backside. And then Sandy. And Sandy was barely a Category 1. It required a tailwind to make a Category 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Barely a Category 1. And look at this. Look at the damage it caused. So one of the things that we've learned is the reason that people are struggling with storm surge is they have a clue what their elevation is or their vulnerability. Now I'm going to pick on Florida for a second because it's usually more fun to pick on another state that I'm in. And then I'm coming back to North Carolina. So this is a poll of people in Florida. So the dot represents, on the map here, represents where they actually are when we polled them. And so we know their elevation, where we polled them. And then we asked them, do you know your elevation? And the only thing encouraging about this is that 55% was smart enough to not even try. It's like, I have no idea. I'm clueless. There's wisdom in that. Because there's another part of this. We asked them if they could get it right within a 5-foot error bar. Gave them a 5-foot margin of error, right? And only 14% got it right. 14% of people in Florida could identify their elevation within a 5-foot error bar. No matter, now look, I know what you're thinking, because no matter where I go, everybody, no, our residents are smart. They know their elevations. So I present to you results from North Carolina. And I apologize, this one is overwhelming because it's new work and I hadn't had a chance to put it in that fancy graphic yet. But basically, you see those orange bars on the far right? Those are the people that don't know. DK is don't know. But basically, it's telling you the same thing, that North Carolina residents do not know their elevation. And if they don't know their elevation, they don't know their vulnerability. And in fact, I asked the guy on the plane right here, preparing for this, what are the 3 takeaways from the North Carolina survey? And he said, people who are inland, who aren't vulnerable, think they're vulnerable, and people at the coast who are vulnerable think they aren't. It's flipped. It's upside down. Apparently, if you weather 2 or 3 storms, you're suddenly an expert, and you're suddenly like, no, right? So this is what we're up against here in coastal Carolina and everywhere we go. It's not just you. Now, one of the things that hurt us is the over-reliance on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Now, back a long time ago when the Saffir-Simpson scale was first developed, they had the right idea. The idea was to help elevate storm surge, to help increase awareness to storm surge. So they stuck it into the Saffir-Simpson scale, and back then it was a good way of doing business. And then fast forward to today's era, and look at these storms which are coming out of the Saffir-Simpson scale old storm surge bins. So this was the old storm surge bins. You know, remember, you used to walk around with a little handy-dandy little Saffir-Simpson scale card, and if Drew told you it was going to be a Cat 1, you whipped that thing out and said, oh, that's 4 to 5 feet. I'm good. That's where we were a few years ago. But here you have these storms. So this is what the storm surge that actually occurred. So here you have these storms that came out of that bin, if you will. So look, Hurricane Ike produced a storm surge that would have been equivalent to a Cat 5 on the old scale, but it was a Cat 2. Now we got people twisted in knots. Right? Because after Ike, you can bet your rear, I heard it, you missed the forecast, right? We nailed the forecast, but they were looking at their little Saffir-Simpson little handy-dandy card, right? And Cat 2 would have been 6 to 8 feet, and they got over 15. So what did we do? We dropped it. So Saffir-Simpson scale no longer contains storm surge. It's a wind-only scale. And what did we do instead? Is we started developing specific graphics and data and products to storm surge, specific to storm surge. And so we're at an incredibly exciting era with respect to storm surge science and technology, where everything's accelerating rapidly to try to fix this problem from a science and technology perspective. And so we're now developing products like this. And look at this. You can understand this. It's a map of your vulnerability where the colors depict depth. So the brighter the colors, the worse the vulnerability. And you don't have to know your elevation. That's the beauty of it. We already factor in the elevation in these risk analysis. And so this is not depth of water above mean sea level or depth of water above normal high tide. This is depth of water above dirt. Now think about this. If people don't know their elevation, and now we have maps that actually show the depth of water above actual land, now you've got a weapon to go to your populace and say, look, where are you on this map? Right? So let's keep with the debunking the myths. So I've sort of pulled you out of the focusing on wind, pulled you out of the Saffir-Simpson scale, introduced you to a new way of thinking, and let's see some old storms. So who remembers Irene? So let's look at, so here are some actual values that occurred with Irene. So does this look about right? Listen carefully, you'll be entertained.
Take out John's fist. That tree went, look at it. Yeah, where'd you go?
First of all,
front of the house.
Why the hell did this person stay? If they have a heart attack, you can't get to them. If they fall and hurt themselves, you can't get to them. If they require special medicine, you can't get to them. This person should have gone. Why didn't they go? I like this one too. So this is low water on the back side. So you can see the trace here. So this is the tide trace. So this is low water on the back side before the storm surge. So it blew out the sound, right? So it blew it out, and there's bare bottom of where it used to be the sound. And why the hell is this person out walking in it? Because look what's going to happen here. As soon as the wind switches, that water is going to rush back in there. There's this little thing I like to call gravity, right? You know, it's coming back. You don't need me. You don't need me in a model to tell you that water is coming back in there, and it's going to come back hard, and it's going to come back fast. And this dude is out there walking around in it. This is to show you people don't appreciate the power and force that we're dealing with. And there's no such thing as just a tropical storm. We need to just go ahead and get rid of that, because this is an example from Louisiana of just a tropical storm, and that's a crap load of water from my perspective. This is what we're up against, all of us, up against this public understanding, this public perspective of storm surge is just not accurate. And this is what I really fear.
New video captures the terrifying moments as Typhoon Haiyan rips through eastern Samar in the Philippines. This house is no match for the powerful storm surge. It isn't long before the surrounding area is completely flooded.
Yeah, in those previous images, I showed you people who were riding it out and flippantly walking around, and that people have no understand the power and the force that the water can come in. Here's another case. This is Waveland, Mississippi, and the name here should tell you something. It should be tell you what's going to happen here. So this is a before. Pay attention to that big old tree for a point of reference, and gone. So by now you can see that the difficult task all of us have in front of us is convincing people of the power of the water, so that when you order an evacuation, they actually go. So these are the actual factors involved in storm surge. So it's more a function of the intensity, the forward speed, the size, what we call radius of maximum winds. If you want to impress people at the dinner party, this is how the scientists refer to the eye wall. The angle of approach, the width and slope of the continental shelf, and then this is especially the case here in North Carolina, all these little local features, rivers and concavity of the coastline. And the reason I want to walk you through this is so many people think in their mind, this is what's going to flood. I've been here for 30 years. I don't need you and your fancy science and your models to tell me I've been here for 30 years. This is what's going to flood. But when you have this many factors involved, the mind can't possibly comprehend where the water is going to go. It's just too difficult. And so I'm just going to quickly walk you through some of these things to help you understand, a little sciencey, but I'll get you through it, how hard it is to predict storm surge. How many of you knew that the forward speed of the storm was a strong determinant of storm surge? The forward speed, not the peak intensity, how fast the storm is moving towards land. Right, again, we're enamored with what category it is on the Saffir-Simpson scale, but how fast it moves towards land is important because now you're determining how long you're imparting wind over an area. And so in this example here, so this is a slow speed, forward speed, not intensity, forward speed. And this is a faster forward speed. Same storm, exact same storm. The only thing that's been changed is the forward speed, and look how much the storm surge changes. So you get a bigger peak at the coastline with the one that's moving quickly, but in the one that's moving slowly, the water goes further inland. And think about this, it makes sense. If you're pushing on the ocean for a long period of time, it can slowly work its way inland. So here's a North Carolina example, and this highly synthetic example. So this is not a real storm. This is just me for test purposes showing you. So in this case, that little black line is the track, which is a north-northwest motion. If I hold everything else the same and just change the angle, surge moved. That's all I did, just change the angle of that black line, and look what happened. Now, how many of you think you can forecast the angle of approach of a hurricane 3 days out? The other thing is the width of the continental shelf. So how quickly, who's fishermen in the audience? How quickly the water gets deep as you drive your boat offshore. So in a steep shelf case, you get less surge but more waves. And in a shallow or gentle, you get more surge but less waves. So it gets really complicated really, really fast. And then when you add all of that together here in North Carolina, well, we've got all these different features, rivers, the concavity of the coast, you got the bays, you got sound-side flooding, you got ocean-side flooding, you got dunes, you got all these things going on. It gets really, really, really complicated really, really fast. The bottom line is the mind can't decipher all of these features. You cannot look at a storm and say, it's going to flood here. It can't be done. And we have to break people of trying to do that. So how do we forecast surge? So now we're going to have some fun. So we're going to get just a little bit geeky, but I promise you it's completely palatable. We're going to tell the story of Sandy. Everybody remember Sandy? All right? So remember the story. It was either going to go out to sea or it was going to come back to land, right? It was a European model versus a United States model. Suddenly it became this great big old global thing. Remember, some of the models that's what these little lines represent, different models. So some of the models were going out to sea and some of them were coming back to land. So this is about 2 days before landfall when most of the models had swung back, striking the U.S. Everybody with me? I haven't lost you yet. These little blue dots over here represent the peak storm surge in New York from one of those blue lines. You with me? So that's feet. The x-axis here is feet of water. So it ranges from no impact, which are the ones that are going out to sea, to 12 feet, which are the one, it's the one that's bending back with a perfect strike. So the range of possible storm surge scenarios in this example, 2 days before landfall, 2 days, is virtually no impact to back crushing. And if anybody in this room thinks they can figure out which one of those blue dots is going to happen, I need your help, because I can't, nor can anybody else on the face of this earth. So if you don't know which one of these blue dots is going to happen, and you have to make a decision that's going to impact public safety, which blue dot are you going to pick? You pick this blue dot and say, I'm just going to chance it. what might happen? So unfortunately, until the state of the science gets to where we can precisely tell you where a hurricane is going to go and precisely tell you how much storm surge there's going to be, we have to do this reasonable worst case analysis. Does it make sense? So that means that when you're hearing briefings from myself or Rich, we're looking at all these different scenarios and pulling out the ones that we think are sort of the higher bound. So when the actual storm comes, and you don't get quite that much water, you should thank your lucky stars and move on, because somebody else probably did get that water. If you look back in Irene, which hit New York, it came in at low tide, and so they didn't get the full effect that we were forecasting, and they were angry. I said, no. You go look at, you go down the street a little bit over there to Connecticut, and you look at how bad they got beat up. So this is just where we are with the state of the science, unfortunately. So how does this work in reality? Let's play it out. Let's play like it's hurricane season and start getting you mentally prepared. So there we go. There's a storm coming at you from the typical approach angle, right? There's the infamous skinny black line on the cone. Does it look familiar? Everybody's starting to get chill bumps. Oh, no, it's almost June 1, right? So we're going to let's build out the cone too, right? So look familiar? So starting this year for the first time, you're going to get a product that looks like this. So you won't have to be thinking about all that complexity that I just talked about. We're going to take one of those upper blue dots, right? We're going to take this reasonable worst case analysis, and then we're going to map the storm surge depth that corresponds to that. It's feet of water above ground, above dirt, and you'll get in a map that looks like this. So now you're not arm wrestling all these advanced scientific things and all this visualization stuff. And these colors, so blue is 0 to 3, yellow is 3 to 6 feet. Orange is 6 to 9, and red is 9+ feet. So why do you think the map stops at 9 and just doesn't bother to go any further? At that point, it doesn't matter. I mean, and hey, you think it's funny? I've been on briefings where somebody would ask, is it going to be 11 feet or 12? And I just wanted to just like walk away. And what decision are you going to make at 12 feet that you wouldn't make at 11? And we actually used this during, it's been in developmental trial and error for the last 2 years, so a beta, if you will. We actually used this during Hurricane Arthur 2 years ago to test it out. And this is an example of how it looked during Arthur. I went out and collected these actual values here. So these numbers here are the actual storm surge that occurred, not forecast, actual. And just to prove to you, a lot of people think that when I say above dirt, they don't know what that means. That's above dirt. So that's physical water above someone's, above ground in somebody's house. That's what we mean. So this would be 3 feet. This is what, when I say 3 feet, that's what I'm referencing. And so these are the actual observed values against this new data that we're going to give you. So remember, blue is 0 to 3, and yellow is 3 to 6. So the line between blue and yellow is 3, right? Look where the 3.1 hits, right on that line. Look where the 5.2 lies. So the 5.2 lies deep into this yellow area, and almost, you can't see it because of the brightness, but almost where the orange starts, which was 6. So this is exciting technology, the ability to more precisely isolate what parts of your community are going to get impacted has great, great ramifications for emergency management. So remember I told you about the upper blue dots? So we don't take the absolute worst dot, because that would be a little bit crying wolf, right? So we take what's called the 10% exceedance. Now you're thinking, oh God, here he goes with the probabilities. So it's okay. So the 10% exceedance is not the worst blue dot, but it's up at the top, meaning that 10% of the time, the actual storm is going to go a little higher, right? So it's not a worst case. And the last thing I want to talk about today is a collaborative effort between our office and the local Weather Service Forecast Office. So Rich's office is Morehead City. We're all part of the National Weather Service. You can think of me as like big picture. I'm supposed to do big picture, and I hand him that big picture. And then he distills that down into something that's specific to your area. So he knows all the communities better than me. He knows all the creeks and the rivers and this sort of stuff. So I take big picture, give it to him. He distills it down into something that's specific to your community, and that's how we work together. So hurricane warnings have been around forever, right? Decades and decades and decades, hurricane warnings. How many of you knew that a hurricane warning is based off wind? Just wind. Just wind, that's it. So here we go. I just sat here and gave you a big old speech about how we need to be focusing on storm surge. Nobody's paying attention to storm surge. We evacuate because of storm surge. People are dying because of storm surge. And yet our warning system is wind-based. So we're going to correct that. Starting this year and next year, we're going to start taking steps towards the first ever storm surge warning in the United States. And so how does this work? You're thinking to yourself, I don't quite get it yet. How does this work? When you hear a hurricane warning, what happens? You hear a hurricane warning has been issued for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. It probably stirs you, right? It probably prompts some sort of activity. So now, in addition to a hurricane warning, which would be for wind, you'll also get a storm surge warning, which is specific to storm surge, because the two don't always go together in time and space. So you could be under a hurricane warning and not a storm surge warning, or you could be under a storm surge warning and not a hurricane warning, or you could be under a hurricane warning and a storm surge warning. And what are they telling you? So if you're under a hurricane warning, you know the wind's going to be bad. If you're under a storm surge warning, you know the storm surge is going to be bad. That's basically how you interpret it. It's not that difficult. It's meant to highlight areas of life-threatening inundation. So we will not go through and issue this thing every time your ankles are going to get wet. It's meant to be for life-threatening situations that would prompt some sort of action. So how do you interpret it? So this little pink area is the warning, right? This is a synthetic, we just made it up. This little pink area is the warning. So how would you interpret it? Well, the first thing is you're either in it or you're not in it. It's just that simple. You're either in a warning or you're not in a warning. So if you're in a warning, that means that the National Weather Service thinks that there's a significant enough chance of life-threatening conditions that we need to tell you something about it. That's how you interpret it. If you're in this pink thing, there's a significant enough chance of life-threatening conditions that you need to do something. You need to do something to protect yourself. That's how you interpret it. It's just that simple. So all that gobbledygook about forward speed and angles of approach and depths and all that sort of stuff, you can distill it down to just that pink area, which I will argue will revolutionize your decision making. You're no longer fighting and fighting this data and this understanding of storm surge. You're basically waiting for the Weather Service to communicate to you clearly what's going to happen. And a lot of your decision making is based off the timing of arrival of tropical storm force conditions, meaning, you know, the big bridges, you can't be having people driving across those big bridges if the wind is blowing, because you turn things over and blow, you know, it's just dangerous. So a lot of the decision making in emergency management is tied to the arrival of the tropical storm force winds. When do the winds get here? They get here tomorrow? They get here next day? They get here tonight? When does it get windy? When is a toupee alert in effect, right? No, I'm being funny to keep you awake. So we're experimenting with a new technique. It won't be available for public consumption this year, so it's sort of forward-looking about doing a better job of giving you guidance of when the tropical storm force conditions will arrive. Because for you in so much of the country, that's a critical decision-making tool. So we're not just working on storm surge, we're working on wind at the same time.